Warning, warning, warning. Culture building is an impossible job. Panic attack, engaged. You should give up. Just give up now. It's too much for you. I'm sorry. It's not just a small list of criteria. It's so much more than that. You can't imagine. You see, you can't be authentic, building culture, and just rolling a dice and reading a table. Cultures, music, and food, and money. It's symbols and colors and flags and heroes. It's the interaction of factions and how they got to be where they are. It's the things that people care about when they wake up in the morning. It's too much. Ha! That'd be easy, wouldn't it? If it was just a list, even a big list. You could do something about that. But it's not. Just to list 100 things and go to work, that'd be simple. That's a nope. A big fat nope. You see, this stuff evolves. Whenever you write something down, it only counts for that day. Maybe a month or a year, but it's going to change. When you write about music, you don't just need to know what this one character likes. The 20-0 human bard, what's he playing? What did his grandma play? It's something different. Your grandma doesn't like the same music you do. What about his kids? What's the new thing? What's the old thing? What's the thing from across the river in the next kingdom or the next town? What musical instruments are unique to what counties, to what states? It's a million things, all evolving all the time. This elf grew up with the Akkadian groove. The human's mom dug Sylvan Rhapsody, and his daughter does the 5-string bug. In the kingdom to the west, it's Phelan Wind. To the east, Gorski Jazz. Hey, it's all related. Oh, and if music matters so much, what are your top 5 performers? It's going to be a big deal when they come to town. Are there bands? Bards? What about the gods of music? Is music a part of religious life? Is it a sin? Hey, little world builder, look at you. What an accomplishment. You've knocked out 1,000 words on music. Well, guess what? That's just the first thing in a list of dozens. I'm sorry it was too much for you. Now that I've driven you to drink, what is it that the people in this culture that you're trying to build consume? You say they're into rum? Where are the sugar plantations? Weather relates to culture. Maybe it's potatoes over sugar cane. That means vodka. Aye, comrade. Vodka and schnapps it is. Hey, you just can't appropriate a whole culture. Well, actually you can. But that's not what we're here for. Nope, we're here to assign homework. I'm going to need 1,000 words on what alcohol is available, what's imported, what is brewed locally. How is drinking tolerated in the society? Is it part of religious services? How much is a bottle of your finest? There is 100% an infinite amount of material you can write on culture. You are not just writing on the kingdom level. Yes, that kingdom will most likely have unifying cultural traits. However, so will each city in the kingdom. You might have racial divisions with different clans or tribes holding their own cultural identity. Then there are countercultures. If people like to dance, there will be a group that thinks it's sinful. Hey there, pick up that chin. I believe in you. You can do this. I know I said you couldn't. Sorry about that. I just wanted you to realize what you were getting into. My first piece of advice, if you're starting from scratch, seriously start from scratch. Throw away as many preconceptions as you can and make this world your own. Ignore all that low-effort rehashed lore from the 5e books. You can do it yourself. While you're at it, throw away the real world too. You're going to invent something special. Have you ever been listening to one of my videos and heard me talk about keeping a development document? If you haven't done it yet, start one now. grab a piece of paper and write culture across the top. But don't stop there. What have we mentioned so far? Dance, drink, racial divisions? There's music, food, justice. You just start that list. Eventually, there will be dozens of things on it. Things that you'll refer to over and over again in your gaming career. Attention, attention, most important advice of the video. This counts for all subjects, hours, and other things in life. You better break up those dreams into manageable tasks. You're not going to do this or any other life goal all at once. You're going to do it in pieces. You won't be done when you start your game, and you won't be ready for the next one either. It will never be done. And that won't stop it from being helpful or super cool. Just start with a template. Nothing wrong with medieval Europe or a pre-technological civilization that you already know a lot about. It can be from a book or it can be something real. This will create a default stance for anything you haven't developed yet. You'll layer your own lore over the top, throwing away old pieces as they become obsolete. Over years of world building, your realms will become truly unique and wholly yours. So where do you start? Well, you might have heard I'm a fan of the oscillating method. Start big, get some general concepts in place, then zoom down to the player level and make it personal. Now, if you're building culture, you've already solved your big physics questions. You've done 100 words at least on astronomy and global geography. You might even have a map. You know how your magic works. It's time to zoom in. Maybe you already have a campaign map. Our goal is nothing less than to weave a tapestry of the world your characters will exist in. So what are some of the big issues that we might want to cover first? What about the government? What's its basic form? Is there a state of peace or conflict? Major wars can have a huge effect on culture. Is the economy sound? Big economic downturns or periods of prosperity can definitely affect your culture. What's the overall development level? High magic? Engineering? The influence of powerful beings? How safe is it? Can a child wander? Or are there dangers at every turn? If so, what are those dangers? How stable are these conditions we're talking about? Is that economic downturn equivalent to the Great Depression lasting a decade? Or is it just a short-term bump in the road? At a more spiritual level, are people happy? Is religion important to the culture? If you didn't notice, we're moving right into the second main phase of this video, the exercise. Now you copy those questions into your development doc. I need to come up with a map. Meet you back here. And here we are. Good to see you again. Yeah, if you watched the Genesis video, we're back among the birch. I didn't get much mileage out of the map in that video, so we're bringing it back. We're going to treat that essay as canon, but jump forward 4,000 years so you don't have to watch it. You should, but you don't have to. Now let's start answering some of those questions. What kind of government are we dealing with? Let's make it a sort of bureaucratic monarchy with some constitutional limits. Does that sound advanced? Our baseline might be medieval Europe, but this society has been cooking for almost as long as ours has. In addition, they have superhero politicians and divine knowledge to help them along. I see this government as one that ensures stability. You always know who the next leader's going to be. By law, the king must retire at the age of 60. This ensures they do not fall out of touch with the populace. Further, the king rules with the mandate of a council of high priests. This limits the power of weak leaders, but allows strong monarchs to advance the empire. Empire? Yeah, they rule over foreign populations. It's still known as the Birch Kingdom and largely operates that way. Rule number 1 in world building: make it dirty. What about cities and towns and other small governments? Those positions are always going to be appointed by local religious authorities. These positions will almost always be held by the noble, religious, or adventuring class. However, some might be taken on by strong economic leaders. There will always be checks and balances, and most business will be handled by the bureaucracy. And who's going to lead those far-flung outposts of the empire? Well, in our timeline, these have been established for a while and mostly converted to the above-mentioned system. However, there is a strong tradition for military governors with near absolute power to control new populations. Is there a state of peace or conflict? It's pretty peaceful, but there are factions eager to go to war with the neighbors. If you didn't notice, I've decided along the way that the Birch people have an entrenched love for military traditions. Is the economy sound? It is, as a whole. I'm not saying there isn't some ups and downs, but with the gods of commerce around, it sure does help level things out. You might remember I mentioned earlier that we are 4,000 years past a global dark age. That means we could have about any level of development we wanted to. I could fill the lands with the most powerful spellcasters and be completely justified. Just the same, I'm not trapped. Regional dark ages are a thing, and it's completely up to the world builder what the top end technology is. I don't want to get too crazy, so I'm going to say 12th level is pretty common, with a lot of adventurers retiring about that time. It's not going to matter for the PCs, but I'm going to justify this by saying it's about the time interplanar superpowers start to notice you. You've just gotten comfortable living in a world with no threats, but you know if you keep going, it's going to get dangerous again. That's going to be great for some people, like the PCs, but not everybody. And really, why chance it? You have more money than you're ever going to be able to spend anyway, and the ability to make more without putting yourself in harm's way. So magic is available, but you can't just go out and buy wishes. Tech is basically maxed out too, wherever you want that to be. Gunpowder? Airships? Steampunk battle droids? How about flying carpets for the masses? Now given this is not a magic versus technology video, we're going to close the can of worms and just leave it at that. Next up, let's talk about threat level. It's not exactly culture, but living a life of prosperity as opposed to life of survival can affect your outlook on things. Conflict is the name of the game for driving plot and character development. Dungeons and Dragons and other RPGs depend on it. Still, there's a workable range here. Keeping in mind that we're setting the stage for the beginning of our story, I'm going to say that the Central Kingdom is pretty secure. News of wars, uprising, and the glory of the Empire are common stories. Most young men and women spend a few years in military service. However, most merchants traveling the roads of civilized lands usually die of natural causes. Thief types tend to stick to smuggling and bloodless heists. So, when a threat does occur, what is it? About the most interesting events of the last few years have been manticores and undead. Nothing serious, but certainly enough to keep travelers on edge. The last major problem was your typical pesky dragon, demanding treasure or else. He was paid off to go away, then taken out when a capable adventuring team was summoned back to handle it. What does this mean for the culture? Well, it certainly affects storytelling. There is enough of a threat that tales of monster incursions make for a scary tale. The terror tabloids are a big seller. Various news sheets that constantly claim some invasion of vile horror is about to happen. Border cities threatened by lich. Small town disappears without a trace. Man-bear troll spotted near the capital. Carved manticore are popular in toy shops, and there are a few zombie apocalypse board games. When it comes to keeping those kids in bed at night, well, it sure is handy when those stories you tell have a shred of truth to them. On a more spiritual level, are the people happy? They're gonna complain. Everybody does. In the interior, Maslow's hierarchy is well tended. However, the farther out you move into the territories, the more Birch is looked at as a conquering power. Foreign rule in this case is relatively benevolent, but after generations, there is still a nostalgia for freedom and independence. This creates a strong, sometimes violent counterculture. Acts of vandalism deface Birch flags and state images. Symbolism of old, regional, sometimes outlawed governments and institutions are the objects of graffiti. The details of subversion vary from territory to territory. Sometimes it's nothing but old men sharing memories of other times. In other places, it's young men and women so prone to rebellion at the best of times, they seek to protest and disrupt. In others, more extreme cases, subversion turns to terrorism and outright rebellion. Is religion important to the culture? Surprise, it is. As mentioned, religion is important to politics. It's also a big part of civic life. Priests perform miracles on a regular basis. There are no bad harvests because there is a church to prevent it. Severe weather is usually mitigated. Disease is mitigated, the plague eradicated. Cattle, goats, and sheep are made fertile. For every problem, there is a temple ready to provide a solution. As such, the church is everywhere. These miracles generate income through tithing. This leads to institutions having economic power in Birch. They build grand temples. Church iconography is everywhere. They support events, education, and charity. In a world where the existence of gods is an opinion due to lack of evidence, religious fervor may wane over time. In a world where the existence of supremely powerful beings is nearly incontrovertible, it remains one of the great pillars of society. Nearly everyone attends services with some regularity. Most recite prayers and affirmations during the course of the day. Clerics and other members of churches are treated with honor and authority. If I'm setting up for a campaign, this is where I hand some information over to the players. We'll get some characters on paper, fiddle with backstories, and start to move toward Session 0 and the game. I run open world, so I'll throw out a few possible adventuring opportunities. I can do anything from bandits to problems in a local mine. I can cook up some political intrigue or create a mystery. In the background, I'll set events in motion. These happenings won't be directly about the PCs, but they will have the opportunity to get involved. I'll probably be looking to tear down the big old Birch Empire, or at least trying. This will create conflict and set up a prosperous environment for the party as they level. It'll be up to the PCs to drive the plot. Maybe they'll save the day or lead the rebellion. In an open world scenario, they might have more of an effect on the world, based on the missions they choose. If that big island to the northwest launches a major rebellion, the PCs can probably squash it. If they've got good sources of information, they might even stop it before it starts. On the other hand, if they ignore it, it could just be the beginning of the end for the Empire. However, that's really not what we're doing here. We're building culture. Let's start with a few traits that will tie the whole map together. It could be ethnicity. Language is good, as is religion. Have you watched The Silver Sentinels? One of the universal traits there is a love of tea. It's part of the economy. There are festivals. Everyone owns serving sets, and their quality is very much a social flex. And now it's time for a great big list of things that we are going to consider. We're going to end up talking about most of this stuff. Maybe. But the first thing we should do is pick out one or two things for our exercise. That's what we're going to build around. There's about 50, so let's roll 3d50 for a 12, an 18, and a 30. That's art styles, customs and traditions, and products. So let's just say that art is extremely important to this culture. There are many traditions and customs related to painting, and several regionally and world-famous artists come from this region. Expanding on this idea, the area produces high-quality paint, canvas, and exports finished products. Buildings are painted brightly and architecturally prone to flat surfaces that are easy to paint murals on. Parents teach their kids to finger paint at a very young age. Having a promising painter as a child is the equivalent of having an unusually athletic child in Texas. You can't walk down the street without passing somebody painting in public. Days of rests and holidays see parks and public spaces fill with artists. There are contests for all ages. The biggest scandal of the year happened when a particular elite was caught using a ghost painter. Like a ghost writer, not a lost soul. Remember that culture is ever shifting and always evolving. Styles will change, while the art remains. The old will call their children's art rubbish, and the young will scoff at the way old people painted. And finally, there will be a counterculture. 5 to 10% of the population who is sick of all the hoo-ha. They wear subdued earth tones in quiet protest. Perhaps they cloister at the only university not built around an art school. Like isolated monks, they study literature and science. Refocusing on culture tying the region together, let's look at a few major commonalities. The idea of colorful architecture is a great one. Towns and cities will likely adopt their own color schemes to stand out. A state that regularly attempts to expand its territory is probably going to have a strong military tradition. Did you know that most flags are red? The color is representing the blood of fallen soldiers, the men and women who died to make the state what it is today. We will stick with that idea and making it a national color common on government buildings. I'm also really liking this idea of murals painted on the sides of buildings. It could be the portraits of war heroes, the symbols of conquering legions. In decades and centuries past, I can see murals being painted over as the birch expanded. They would replace the symbols of past governments with their own. Now, what kind of rituals can we build out of a love of painting? I could see a portrait of a newly married couple being virtually mandatory. Perhaps an evening event is held the week before the ceremony where the couple sits for their portrait. There are guests. Some of them might paint their own portraits of the couple. Most people just show up for the food and drink. If it's a gift-giving culture, brushes and canvases might be a common thing. It would be like giving dice to a role-playing couple. Anniversaries, birthdays, they could all lead to something special. And that means there are craftsmen who make these fine brushes. Some of them will be definitely magical. Art battles are going to be a weekend pastime. Instead of live bands, some bars will host art contests. You go for a nice meal, and up on stage, 5 or so artists are doing some flash painting for prizes. Pretty much every holiday is going to have painting events, even if it's just a chance to display one's work. Zooming into household life, maybe once a year, a child's forehead is painted. They lean into a wall, leaving a mark, thus demonstrating their growth over the year. Middle class and nicer homes will almost certainly have a space set aside as a studio. The conversation is going to take over polite conversation as well. Have you painted anything good lately? What are you into? Portraits or landscapes? Now, not everybody is going to be super into it, but I think it's going to be like sports. How many times do baseball references come up in your life? Probably weekly? More? Maybe you just know a few people who are into a given sport. If you're tall, how many people have asked you, "Hey, did you play basketball?" Now, how does all this affect gameplay? If you want to really buy into it, make their first few adventuring hooks painting adjacent. Perhaps they have to rescue an abducted artist before a big competition. Maybe they've been hired to steal a particular painting. This can all be some pretty typical adventuring stuff. It was ogres. They hit the wagons and hauled everything into the hills. They probably don't even know what they have. What are a bunch of monstrosities going to do with paint? You just get it back. It'll be worth the reward. Now, of course, I'm thinking if ogres stole a bunch of stuff in my campaign, the party's going to get up into those hills and find out the ogres have started their own artist commune. All right, now what is all this other stuff on the list? Let's start with artifacts. The Easel of Giro sits on display at the Temple of Gadira. It's said the wizard Giro was able to paint the likeness of Tiamat with such perfect accuracy the demon was entrapped, forever imprisoned in the painting. Now that's some dramatic stuff, but there's going to be simpler things too, like paintbrushes in museums, the tools of former masters and heroes. And don't forget that military tradition. There's going to be weapons and the flags and banners of famous squadrons. Musical styles and other entertainment. I can definitely hear those lutes playing quietly in the background during painting events, but I can also see the drums pounding away at the end of the street for all those people who didn't like the feeling of paint on their fingertips. We can use a lot of these points to start drawing divisions within the empire. There is a big tavern tradition around this little island here. Public life is such a big deal that houses have noticeably smaller sitting rooms. Some don't even have kitchens. Most people spend most nights at their local tavern for fun, food, and friends. Meanwhile up here, caroling isn't just for Christmas. Every night, groups of amateur singers gather to walk the streets singing songs to celebrate life. What about diet? Where do most people get their calories? Rice? Potatoes? I see this as being a subtropical climate, so wheat's a pretty good choice. Bread, beef, and beer, who can say no to that? Oh, lots of fish, too, if you're near the coast. You can get a lot deeper than that, though. Think about real-world culture, and your mind is very quickly going to go to food. You can easily spend a little bit of time thinking about 1 or 2 meals for each region of your world and what's going to be popular, what's going to mark it as the culinary destination it deserves to be. Let's make the food spicy in the north. Lots of beans of several different varieties in the kingdom itself. Again, where the coasts are, fishing is going to be a big deal. So let's say salmon, amberjack, and eel. It's almost always cooked, but way up here, they eat it raw sometimes. Now, education can be cultural too. Our whole damn planet has adopted a very similar system, but it doesn't have to be that way. Maybe communal schools are completely unheard of and children are taught strictly by parents and relatives. It's probably going to reduce the overall education levels, but that's okay. Cultures need weaknesses as well as strengths. In fact, let's play that whole thing up. Overexposure to paints and solvents has reduced the overall intelligence level of the whole region. That doesn't mean it affects the PCs, but outsiders look at the birch as being slow. What about plants and animals? How would you use that? And yes, I know I'm jumping around. Don't worry about it. So, going back to the painting thing and the general love of color, I think the birds in the region are going to be known for their bright colorations. That might have been where everything started. They are a common symbol on flags and banners. They are a common pet as well. We'll even give them peacocks. It's easy to justify. Obviously, birds of this nature have been imported over the centuries and become endemic. Same thing goes with plants. The more brilliant, the better. Households keep potted blooming plants and butterfly gardens if they have the room. City parks are planted with blooming shrubs, and businesses plant roses to occupy the space under windows. And now, attitudes. Places are known for the personality of their residents. New Englanders are sometimes considered rude. The southern U.S. is known for hospitality. Sorry I haven't traveled more, but tell me about the attitudes of your neighborhood in the comments. This can extend to a general optimism or pessimism, and it can change over time. It's work ethics, community spirit, and a sense of invitation. When travelers come to your border stations, does the sign say closed or come on in? We're in the home stretch now. If you've been looking at the list, we've already covered a lot. Next up is economics. But you all know I talk about fantasy eco a lot, so just remember, over most of the time in most of the world, things aren't what you take as normal. In other words, real-world economics will not always apply if you don't want them to. There's a big variance over time and space when it comes to work ethic, responsibilities of the state, and the role of currency, family structure, the nature of working, and many other economy or economy-adjacent subjects. Now, we've talked about ethics a number of times. We've skirted around the edges, but here's a few other things to think about. Everyone likes to world build cultures with honor and strong, wholesome values. And you can do that if you want to, but not every culture has to have these characteristics to be worthy of attention. What's the value of a promise? If your raid fails, are you honor bound to stab yourself to an unalive status? Does the art of the birch painter get copyright protection? Oh, was that a legitimate question? Sure, let's say yes. In a culture where art of any form is of such high value to that society, I think it makes sense that originality is important to the point that it is protected. Elaborate segue to fashion and dress. We've already established this is a colorful place, but there's other issues here. What are the clothes made from? Animal hides are cool and all, but you can't clothe a big population with them. Is there flax? Silk? What about cotton and wool? You can have a mix, but there might be things missing too. However, this is fantasy. You can invent whatever you want to. And hey, are the birch walking around in body paint only? Finally, we're going to wrap it up with history. Every culture needs a timeline. When did the key elements of the population turn up on the scene? What big events are remembered and honored? Usually, this is going to be wars, but natural disasters, celestial events, and economic turbulence might all become part of the people's heritage. In the Birch Empire, the story of Induri is often told. The grandson of the second king was born with a gift. That gift would shape the land. Induri is known as the first painter, and taught the birch to create art. There are statues of his likeness throughout the kingdom. Schools exist in his honor. Seriously, what town does not have an Induri park? Did I mention all these points on the list are totally optional? And please don't wait till you have every detail filled out to start your campaign. Your projects don't have to include a special wave or salute, but it can. You don't have to break down every religion to the point that you know what all the philosophical debates are. Why the northern churches of Maki, god of color and expression, favor a deep red as opposed to the bright reds of the south. Does it matter that no one can start eating until the eldest raps 3 times? Do we really need to know the variances of marriage customs throughout the lands? All these traits I listed and the ones that you're going to add as you work on your own development document, they're going to be great for highlighting a few things in your world building culture. Another thing it's going to be good for is if you're doing some fish out of water stuff. For instance, your adventurers are in a distant land and walk into a tavern. Everyone shouts, "Oha!" and then they just go back to what they were doing. It doesn't take much to make the cultures of your world distinct. Now that's going to put us way over 40,000 words. I'm over half an hour on recording time. That's going to make this a pretty beefy video. The lessons we've learned today will be included in future exercises, even the ones that aren't just about building culture. We might even come back to visit the Birch someday. Oh, and that's my face. Hey, just wanted to go live again and tell you this video isn't to tell you about the things you're doing wrong. You are all capable of building beautiful worlds. For those of you hoping to add just a little bit of depth to your world, I hope that this inspires you in some small way, or a big way. If it does, make sure you hit that like button. If you don't world build the way I do, that's fine. There might still be something here that you can add to your own unique process. I want to thank you all for stopping by. I enjoy our time together. If you can, leave a like, leave a comment. It all matters tremendously to this station. I genuinely want to hear what you all have to say. I'll see you next time. Have a great day. Cheers.